Hello and welcome to Wonkette's not so live uh, Labor Day Jamboree. I'm Robyn Panacchia. This is the lovely and talented Stephen Robinson. I'm normally good at making sentences, but not today apparently.
Hi, Robin. Let's jump right into our Labor Day celebration, which we owe to unions and activists
Yay!
historically. And this year we do have a major strike updates to discuss. Obviously, in my neck of the world, the actor strike and the Writers Guild of America strike, which has been going on. The Writers Guild has been on strike since May.
Yeah,
And do you? I mean, there's always I monitor this. There's sometimes talks, often talks, but nothing is. It seems as if
yeah.
they're
Nothing.
not
There's
making
hasn't been
any.
any advances yet, but like I think the most recent thing, it's really just people criticizing studios for like that's the only big news right now as far as that goes. Um, a lot of the reality people are still talking about unionizing as well, which is awesome. Although a lot of the like Bravo fan blogs and everything have been criticizing Bethany for like bringing sorry I can't talk today for pushing for the union stuff, or actually not even criticizing her for that, just criticizing her in general. It's almost sort of like maybe the network is a little bit behind it, I don't know, but so that's what's been going on with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the union busting. I mean, it's been something from I wouldn't say it's entirely from the right. It's sort of a center right thing. I know Nikki
Hmm.
Haley was talking about how no unions in South Carolina when she was governor there, and how terrible unions are. And um, there are people who just sort of that the unions here are being unrealistic, and they were all a scam because writers, and actors were never going to make enough to have a living wage, which doesn't make any sense. It's their like we
Except
all um
a lot of polls are showing that 88% of young people support labor unions. The vast majority of people in general, 91% of Democrats, 69% of independents, and 52% of Republicans even approve of unions.
Oh yeah,
According
I
to
mean,
recent
folks
polls.
approve of the unions. I think their argument is that for this specific issue, that the unions are being unrealistic in what they want, and I think the challenge with that is often we see this in outside of this industry as well, which is just that people like something, a good or a service, and expect that people will starve to provide them that service.
Oh
So
yeah.
yes, you have to like actors need to be able to eat and live, especially in Los Angeles where all this stuff is focused. Even in Vancouver, when like CW actors or whatever were working there, it's pretty expensive. They weren't getting paid to like travel back and forth, and I think what happens is, well, your whole work product requires actors and writers at all levels, not just at the most successful, but at all levels to be able to do this for a living. And that goes the same
Mhm.
with any sort of corporation where you need people to be able to actually live and not, they always say, like, oh, this is just, you should just do this job where you don't eat until you get
Yeah.
another cool job. And that just means of sort of like even if that worked, so even if like for two or
Mhm.
you only worked retail for 3 years and then became a fancy executive, like every TV movie or likes to kind of the very American dream
Mhm.
type thing, it's like that's still 3 years of you barely surviving or subsisting. And I think way too many people think that is how it should be. There's a lot of
Well,
folks
people
of
love the idea of
my
starving
generation.
artists as long as they're not the ones starving. But also in general, I feel like Americans really love the idea of people, not making a lot of money at work and struggling, and then finally, eventually, maybe making it and being okay. Like that is a story that Americans tend to love as long as it's, other people. We also assume that, none of us want to pay more for anything, especially because, everyone kind of feels broke most of the time. Um,
Hmm.
but the thing is that, like, we can't, things cost a lot more than we are paying for them a lot of the time in order to ensure that everyone is fairly compensated. But at the same time, like, we're not, like, it doesn't, it's just a whole freaking mess. Um,
Well, it's a
like even in our
status thing.
industry, well, in our industry, people will get mad, like, about, they're either mad about advertisements, or they used to be mad at advertisements because they didn't want any ads. They didn't want to be bothered with ads. They were mad about clickbait. They didn't want any clickbait. They didn't want anything like that. They got, they had the whole saved you a click thing. And now people are mad about paywalls because, hey, you didn't want advertisements. So now we have paywalls and donations. And it sucks. I wish we didn't have to have them, but, like, we need to get paid.
Well, so yeah, like people need to get paid, and it frustrates me. And I've seen this of like, well, you know, you have to combat that disinformation that's out there with all that. Well, the people need to get paid who are doing that, because, and I've mentioned this before, I'll
Yeah.
go, I'll go work for the Daily Wire and feed my kids and be like, if they're paying, like, I don't have a
Yeah.
like this idea that we have to starve to provide. It has never made sense to me personally. To me, it's like if I went to a, it's a good or a service. So if you're going to a
Mhm.
restaurant and I'm getting like my burger and fries and no one, and I'm not paying for that, then it would be like, okay, well, this isn't some magical Star Trek. Like, where is this money? Like, how is this
Yeah.
being? How are they buying the food? How are they paying? Like, how is this occurring? And if like, and if it was like a magical, wonderful world where no one has to pay anything, and this
Mhm.
utopia, that's fine. But generally, it's like, oh no, no, actually, everyone who cooked your food and served you and made you that great drink and you had a great time and then you left, they are starving to death. Like,
Yeah.
I would be like, oh, that sucks. And yet and yet for some reason in our industry, people are just be like, oh, well, I still want to enjoy that content or whatever, but I can't really pay for it.
Well, if you're
Sorry, because
really
you're starving.
pure, I mean, and we're about as pure as it gets, considering, like, we're, like, donations only. But, like, you can't have it both ways. You can't have both, like, we don't want advertisements and we don't want clickbait, and we also want things to be free. But the problem is that, like, we end up all, like, fighting amongst each other instead of generally fighting against the people who have the most power and the most money. In Hollywood, the people who are producing, or not producing, but, like, the people who are making the most amount of money in these industries are not the actors for the most part. It's, the business executives and everything, and they get so much money, and they're not the ones producing the, like, actual
Well,
content. They're just
yeah.
there to collect money. And that's the problem with so many industries in general, is that there's just one guy at the top whose job it is to take all of the money. Like,
Well, they make it seem as if there is this sort of, the people at the top are the ones taking all the risks, as if it's the organized crime. Because
yeah.
like, if you're the Don, like that's a serious, like
Yeah.
there's like, if I'm
Like, you
one of
can
the
go to
lower level,
jail.
and people are gunning for you, like it's, you don't get to sleep. Like if you're like one of the button man, like you can probably like walk down the street, like no one really know, like it's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
But they make it this sort of thing of where, okay, well, the guy who greenlit Barbie
Yeah.
he was such a risk. It's like, okay, there's the two options. You either say, okay, go make a Barbie, and it makes more than $1 billion and you make tons of money, or it flops and then you get fired.
Yeah.
That does happen, but then you get this incredible golden parachute. So it's just like, okay, you produced this terrible movie, Robyn. Now go away. Here's $20 million as part of your severance. It's like,
That would
okay,
be
well,
really sad for me, though.
I
Only
don't
20 million?
I never have to work again. All right, but terrible. It's not like you get shot, but they make it
Yeah.
somehow like this. Oh my God, the risks and so forth. I mean, I still say our biggest labor challenge in the world has always been sort of this inherent classism in American society, our
Oh
need
yeah.
to look down upon others. I saw this in Seattle years ago when I was still living in Seattle, and they were raising the minimum wage, and
Mhm.
saw online someone I knew who was complaining about the increase in the minimum wage because she had just gotten to lower management. So she had been at
Yeah.
the old minimum wage forever, and now she was at the new one, and then that would mean that she's only making, say, like $1 more than the proposed a minimum wage, and that's that made her very angry and everything. And here's how hard I had worked to get to this point, and it's just like, okay, well, you're probably getting screwed for how much you're getting paid in this current job,
Mhm.
and also like, but there's this whole thing of like looking down at not at the person who's making, your boss is probably making twice what you make, but you're looking down at the other person making, just slightly less and feeling hard,
Oh yeah, so it's like they're the
mistreated.
reason why I'm not getting what I deserve, and that's exactly how management
No,
works. That's exactly how the people with the power want things to be. They don't want you to be like, oh hey, why is that person 10,000 times richer than like everyone who works for them?
well, yeah.
They want the people fighting amongst themselves. They want them to say like, oh, why should this McDonald's worker get 15 an hour when that's what I made, doing like what I consider to be a real job at one point.
Well,
And
it's a status thing, and it
yeah.
becomes, if you think of the whole, to me, the biggest example of the challenge of labor, and it goes into the Richmond from Richmond song, and all of this about the working class. You've written about this last week, and we can get into this, but the Civil War, essentially, where you have dirt poor white people, because it wasn't actually as many of the rich people could buy a dirt poor white person to go fight for them. That was a
Yeah.
thing, So dirt poor white people were fighting for the right of rich white people to make
Hmm.
tons of money on free labor.
Yeah.
Now, free labor means that, hey, dirt poor white person, you don't get that job. That is now being a job by
Yeah.
someone who now owns a human being. And so the whole idea is that I'm going to go get, and they're so filled of racism and cultural resentment and
Mhm.
all the sort of BS that they're literally dying so that rich people can continue to have free labor.
Yeah.
And to me, that just says it all. Like, okay, well, that is every challenge, every battle comes up to,
Truly the most
well,
American way to die, though.
rich people must continue. And they're being told, I'm
Yeah.
fighting. That was the whole lost cause. We're fighting for a
And they're
way of
still
life.
fighting for it.
What way of life so that rich people, so
Hmm.
Scarlett O'Hara doesn't have to work ever and has grand
Right.
balls, and there's free labor. So the person who dresses her and wipes her ass is a black woman,
Yeah.
but that could be a job that a white person could do. The Scarlett O'Hara ass wiping
Yeah. They could
job
make
could
a
have
living
been,
wage off of that.
that could at
I
least
mean,
be if they
yeah,
have to
I'm
pay
sorry, the curtain
people.
dress alone, that was couture. Like,
That's an all day thing, and instead it's
yeah.
just like, okay, well, we just need, so the way of life becomes there has to be people at the rock bottom, and that's the
Mhm.
resentment. And so you'd written about this where, man of the people, Chris Murphy, whining about that we're not, Nick Kristoff also joined the thing of like how we are dismissing these things. Well, we're not dismissing them, we're just, these have been discussed. Like
Yeah.
this whole thing, it's all lost cause narrative. It's all cultural resentment. Like if you dig deep, the issue and why, like it's always the major issue. Like why is my father and my relatives, working class people in the South, why are they not whining, complaining about stuff the same way that white people from the same neighborhood?
Yeah.
Because it's all a sort of cultural sense of my class status has been diminished. So more often than not, it was white guys. Now they got to work for a woman or maybe work for a black guy or compete for different jobs, and their status, what their way of life was, has
Hmm.
changed. And Murphy thinks that somehow there's some sort of solution or somehow empathy with him, and he's not even trying. As you said, it's not even like he has proposed some grand
Yeah.
scheme. He's one of the
No,
many
he
sort of
hasn't come up with
pro
anything.
corporate.
His plan is, hey, liberals on social media, be nicer to people when they say bigoted things, and then they'll vote for us, and then you can have nice things.
But he's
Like
just
that's
so that
really
he's
like what they're saying. And I'm sorry, there's not the Democratic Party has like a little bit of a problem with blaming, liberals on social media for, having conversations about stuff that other people might find annoying. And meanwhile, you've got the GOP like literally like passing bills so that like, oh no, we don't want, Nazi Joe to get fired from his job because he was talking about, how much he doesn't believe the Holocaust happened on Twitter. Like they don't like they're out there passing those laws or trying to pass them.
yeah.
And
And if you can
we're
pass
not
the
saying,
pro
oh,
Nazi job, maybe you can go ahead and pass. Democrats can pass the don't get fired because you're gay law. Like these are not,
yeah.
and that like you could even try. So it's not even like Republicans are shying away from these quote unquote social issues. They realize that those are work issues because the Nazi wants to be able to
Mhm.
have a job. And this is something that, to your point, because last week also people like Dan Goldman, and then there's Marie Perez, a representative in Washington, and they were, both like, I speak for my constituents, I defy the progressive wing, and really echoing a lot of rhetoric about student loans, which are lies. Like they're
Mhm.
lies.
Yeah.
Like it's not just well-off white people taking these gender studies classes, which are good things to take, but beside,
Yeah.
it's not that. It is often, they've done the studies, working class people, people of color, a
Yeah.
lot of the Democratic base benefits from this, and they can't defend it. Instead, they actively vote against this stuff. And there was this whole debate I've seen in some quarters of mainstream, among mainstream Democrats. I call them you've referred to them as MSNBC Democrats, and are like, oh well, we got to let them beat up on the progressives because they're in this tough Republican district, even though Republicans in districts that Biden have won don't go around insulting white evangelicals or whatever.
Yeah.
But but
Weird how that
what
happened.
yeah, like what that misses is like you are just defending that, like the idea that rural people are somehow obsessed with defending the interest of moneyed people. And that's how
Mhm.
you Manchin's done this, Cinema's done this. That's what normal people want, is that they want to get, yeah, get rid of the unions, get rid of this. Like that's the grand centrist thing. Doesn't really work. That's not what they want. And the reason that Democrats sometimes struggle in those rural areas is that, one, they look like politicians, and frankly, you look like people that I don't trust because you run down your own team.
Mhm.
Like I like people who don't run down their own team. Why would I trust them?
Well,
And
because
that's the
it's like
concept.
that's how they get street cred is the Sister Soldier thing. They like, you know, they think if they say, "Oh, I don't like those progressives. Those people, I'm with you. They're terrible." That people are going to go, "Oh, look at them standing up to the, scary progressives on Twitter who sometimes say things that annoy me." Um, but
Yeah,
what?
well,
Yeah.
and cinema, and because Perez was called the next cinema, and someone has, one of her
Mhm.
defenders says that's really sexist just because they're women. But it's not, the comparison's not just
You can
because they're
also be the
women.
next to a mansion.
Well, yeah, well, it's specifically because
Yeah.
of their how they are trying to differentiate themselves from Democrats. Specifically saying, I'm not part of this club, I'm
Yeah.
independent, which doesn't, Republicans do not do this. They are definitely, they're the ones who are the more collective than certain Democrats. Because certain Democrats almost run on this sort of Ayn Rand thing of, I'm an individual representing you and I'm not part of this club,
Yeah.
except when it's convenient, But generally speaking, people like someone who's, I'm one of you and I'm helping you and all of my friends and I support all these people. But what's interesting is that Cinema only got elected because Jeff Flake got run out of
Mhm.
town because Republicans had gotten extreme. And in Washington, in Perez's district, she only got elected because the Republican who had her seat previously voted to impeach Trump, then got bounced. And then the person who won the primary was a complete literal Nazi. We've referred to them,
Yeah.
and so what's surprising in those cases, and this is something you've often said as well, so Democrats will win in those scenarios and then feel like, okay, instead of like actually I've won, I'm going to go forth and do progressive stuff. Oh, I just need to be maybe maybe slightly to the left of Flake, slightly
Yeah.
to the left of the lady who voted for to impeach Trump. I will essentially be the center right person who's sane. I'll be the sane Republican. And that's not going to last long. That didn't work the first time, but
Mhm.
they really feel like that's what you should be doing. You should be pursuing moneyed interest, promoting 1990s. They just obsessed the idea that all of the 1990s era, Clinton era stuff was how we were kicking ass and taking names.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's the case.
But
I mean, you
here's the
could
thing, like we're coming at a point where we're finally starting to get back to like pre 1990s levels of like strikes and union support. I mean, we're not there yet, but we've had so much success this summer. We had the UPS strike where the Teamsters won a great contract. They did not end up going on strike. Right now, the American Airlines flight attendants just voted to authorize a strike because they're, getting the shaft, and the pilots just secured a 46% raise, which is pretty awesome for them. But the flight attendants also need to get their share. The flight attendants union is amazing. There's also been um, about 3,000 workers at 150 Starbucks striking. Like there's a whole lot of movement going on there. And it's all across the country. It's in all of these areas. And I think that there's so much more support than, a lot of people are willing to realize for unions, for labor, for like the idea of people being able to just have enough to live on. Like there's not as much, there's really no there's no group of people out there right now besides like, like beltway types going around being like, I think that, poor people are getting too much right now. I think, rich people, we need to be taking care of the job creators. That whole like Reaganite, Clintonite thing has really like very much run its course because people just people want their fair share, and
no
they're not
that
that great. They're not. People are kind of done with like I'll sacrifice for the job creators there who's important, and like stop pandering to those people who like clearly do not exist in like enough numbers to vote for anyone.
Yeah, I mean, Democrats have always been a pretty pro corporate party in general. And so they're very nervous about the ways in which they do push, um, I would say,
Yeah.
particularly pro labor policies or especially when it's against the people who are funding all of the
Yeah.
elections,
This is
right?
our winning
Coincidence.
issue. This is absolutely the way that we win. Through like like labor measures, through labor rights, because that's what people want right now. Like I don't
Yeah.
people
I mean,
want to be
I
able to
found that
survive.
smaller businesses don't walk the walk as much. They talk a lot of the talk, but I find that smaller businesses, mom and pops, and
Mhm.
even in the nonprofit theater world, they're the ones who are nervous about increased minimum wages or certain basic union things that unions promote that are pro labor, because then they start to plead poverty, which to me I'm always sort of like,
Okay,
well,
so small businesses, yeah.
if the choice is between union labor rights through unions and and all, it's only big business, so you kind of wrestle down Walmart and force labor rights. There's money to go around because those people,
Mhm.
there's billions or whatever. I'm far more for that than, I'd much rather have a Starbucks everywhere that, it's completely unionized than, the cool, quirky mom and pops, coffee shops that plead poverty and say, oh, well, we can't have vacation days, or we can't have, or we need people to kind of, we're a family, Robyn, so
Yeah,
we need you to
yeah,
kind of,
that's crazy.
so we need you to work 7 days around the holidays because we can't afford to have everyone out off at the same time, stuff like that. And I think, you know, uh, the ability to sort of do the cost, I think you need to step up and do it. That is sort of the weird way in which I become very, I guess, pro corporate, because it's kind of like, look, if you can't afford to treat your employees
Well,
like
we've
people,
also made exceptions for small businesses that have not been great. And that is a
Mhm.
problem. It is a problem that in many states, small businesses are not, they're like not beholden to any discrimination laws. Like they can actually, if you have under 15 employees federally, the Civil Rights Act does not apply to you. The Americans with Disability Act does not apply to you. You can fire someone for being pregnant or being gay or being black or being a woman, any of those reasons. Uh, and it's not a problem as long as you have fewer than 15 employees. And now that's a lot of states have much lower and thresholds, and other states have like there's no number other than like one. You are the only employee, therefore you don't have to like. It's okay if you discriminate against yourself, but yeah, that's how things work in most states, and the
Yeah.
vast majority of businesses, like numbers wise, are these small businesses, and they employ huge numbers of people who don't
Mhm.
have basic protections. um, and a lot of the time these businesses aren't, they're not going to be unionized, but there are protections that we can put into place that would help those workers. Number one, getting rid of at-will employment. There's no reason why anyone needs to fire anyone for no reason. And I've said before, I think this is a huge, a very winning issue for Democrats, because I think that people don't want to have to feel scared that they're going to get fired from their job randomly, because that is terrifying. And not having that fear would, I think, dissipate a lot of actual economic anxiety for most people. The other thing that would help small businesses a lot, actually, uh, is one thing that a lot of people don't like, but universal health care. Because if you can't, a lot of these smaller businesses can't afford good healthcare plans, and they're trying to compete with larger businesses that can offer better healthcare plans. That's going to help them. That's going to help workers who want to be able to switch jobs. That's going to help people who want to start their own businesses if they want to
Mhm.
start a small business. Um, Not having your healthcare, your ability to like actually survive if something terrible happens to you, tied to your work, is, it's an issue of freedom, basically. um and it would probably be the one of the greatest labor rights victories in the history of our country. I mean, in
Yeah.
victories of, there are, other reasons it's good, but that would really, really, really help people. um
Yeah, the parade raining aspect of that, being and having been from the corporate world, is that one challenge with, well, and I certainly agree with what you said about at will employment. One of the challenges is that companies have just become worse about how they hire. This already, they sometimes have you do tap dances and 2 week
mhm.
interview and all sort of stuff. Um, the referral system is inherently biased. But
Oh
one of the
yeah.
reasons people love that is because, and I'm sure we've all benefited from that. Like we gotten something because we knew someone
Mhm.
at a company. But the benefit, I mean, there's certain positives to it, because I could say, oh yeah, hire Robyn because I've
Yeah.
worked with her and I can vouch for her professionalism and her quality
Yeah.
of her work, whatever. But others, it's like it just does cause a sense of, okay, if I'm gonna have to hire someone and never be able to fire them, because that's how it's perceived, right? That's what corporations will, and even small business will say, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that it is to my benefit whenever I hire someone. I don't know how we fix that per se.
Well, here's the
Trying to find
thing.
a
The way that it
balance.
works in other countries, it's not that you hire them and, they're there forever, even if they're terrible. There's actually like a probationary period first. Like it's not, that doesn't kick in until 3 months, or in some places even 6 months. So really what it is protection after you have a job. You can't be fired for literally no reason, which
Hmm.
is, you know, fairly basic. We're the only country in the world that doesn't have this. And,
Well, yeah.
I
I
don't
mean, I agree with you. I think it also goes to why I get accused of beating up on Democrats a lot, but I do think it's messaging. So Republicans are
Mhm,
very good at. So let's say this was a potential law.
mhm.
Republicans are very good at hitting the airwaves and having politicians, their politicians on Twitter and everyone with all the cases of the poor small business owner, the lady who couldn't fire some guy who was hit, whatever reason, they'll find
Yeah,
example that
but then we
sells or
go in
whatever.
with all
And
of
we
these
don't.
yeah, but
We are very unlikely to have the example. Even now with trans rights, I feel like, um, that's why I was very upset with Chris Murphy, because it's like, well, where are you? Where's your Atlantic interview about this, the family in my neighborhood that had to pay
yeah,
$200,000 more than the going rate to get out of Texas because their trans daughter was being torn, like their security
yeah,
of their trans child, they had to leave, like refugees. They're literal refugees. There was another person I knew in in Tennessee, was literally on GoFundMe to escape, to
mhm,
flee, to get to another and of course living far, lower standards of living than they would have been otherwise, because they have to live in one of these, quote unquote blue states, which are often more expensive. But the human aspect, where's that Atlantic interview, Chris Murphy? Where are you talking about this person and humanizing it? But instead, you're humanizing the latest sob story from white dudes that we've heard all the time. So I don't. It's not like I don't
I think
care.
we're all
It's
aware
I've
that
heard it all the
conservative
time.
white dudes are unhappy. Like we're all aware. We know. They've made it clear. They've started clubs. They've been, they march with torches. We know that they're unhappy. There's no question there. The problem is that like what they're unhappy about is like kind of evil.
Well, yeah, and look, I was accused of being very Machiavellian again in my corporate days, because
Mhm.
I would try to actually persuade people. But but because if I go into a room and the person's going to make the choice, who has the power to make the choice, is say you, I need to sell you on why to make this choice. If I come in and say, hey Robyn, you're racist and you dress poorly and whatever, and now go make this change, you're probably going to be like, fuck you, go away. And you have the power to do that. So I'm all for however we can kind of go and say, hey, this is in our interest. And I think Sanders and Warren got beat up a lot for trying to do that. Um, and, whereas now I think the more corporate wing will sort of do it in the worst way of like, let's just enable the worst impulses instead of just sort of like, okay, here's how we have actively made life
But
better,
here's the
instead of
thing:
for these
what
people.
Warren and Sanders didn't do, like they actually, they weren't standing there being like, oh, we'd love to have universal health care, but liberals on Twitter are annoying. And so therefore, we're going to have to wait on that. They didn't go in there and say, oh, hey, random white guys, we really feel for you. It's got to be really sad being you. They didn't like, say, oh, it's okay if you want to be transphobic, if you want to be racist, we'll accept you. They didn't do that. They reached a lot of people by just, going with the economic message and, also social justice issues, but also just flat out saying, hey, this is wrong. No one should have to live like this. We don't want
Yeah.
anyone to have to live like this. Wouldn't it be nice to do stuff so that no one does? And that has resonated. Like, you don't have to do, like, there's no necessity of like kissing this particular ass.
Oh
Like
yeah.
no one is asking anyone to do that except for these people who like there's no one's going to give you the exchange of, hey, if we get to be really shitty to trans people, you can have these economic measures. That's not an
Mm.
agreement that anyone is asking for or like saying that's a compromise we'd be willing to make, because that's insane.
Well, I mean, I think, and Black people, myself being one, can tell you it's very obvious where you do your sister soldier moments, right?
Yeah.
So if so the idea is that, hey, this song could have been a sister soldier moment in theory, right? Because it's like,
Mhm.
well, we're all about pro labor, pro helping folks. We're, not everyone paying their fair share. But what we're not going to do is look down on other people who are struggling just as hard because of these ridiculous Ronald Reagan era tropes, and calling that out and saying, this is the problem. This is the mistake. This is what these people are feeding people. And you're not a bad person for maybe thinking it. You are to continue thinking it because it's wrong. And we're going to
Yeah.
tell you why
Once
it's
you
wrong.
know for a fact that it is factually untrue, and if you keep saying it, then you're an asshole.
You
You
have the
know?
opportunity to do that, but they don't. Instead of this, and so instead, the sister social moment again is punching down at minorities, and punching down even during Black Lives Matter, even when
Yeah.
people get
Oh,
shot, to have like, oh well, we understand why this song is out there about maybe not wanting to hug cops, and instead being, hey, the I don't want to hug cops song is really mean and made a cop cry, and let's not do that. Let's be more, generous of everything to cops. And that is very clear of the kind of who you're supporting, who you are
yeah.
trying to I mean,
I
and Chris Murphy's
I
connect
don't
to these
even
people
think
is
they're
connect.
trying to support these people. They want to support these people in an easy way, which would be for people like really his big request was wasn't putting anything legislative out. His big request was, hey, maybe liberals on social media could be nicer. And that is insane. Um
Yeah, well, his idea is that every like if we have to agree 110%, and that's his
yeah.
whole thing. Well, it's like you are in a country club of other well-off, most likely Republican type people, and as you wrote, not all liberals agree. We don't
Yeah.
always agree. Everyone does agree. So the idea that like we are demanding complete fealty is just untrue. Yes, there are certain deal breakers, like when on abortion rights, for instance.
When it
And so
concerns
when we
someone's
say,
basic humanity, then yeah, that goes into deal breaker territory.
so the idea that oh, now they have a litmus test about abortion. Well, we have that litmus test because we don't want you after Roe is overturned, we
Yeah.
don't want the leader of the Democratic Party at the time and others actively trying to support an anti-choice Democrat.
Yeah.
And then later, especially when you then say, oh well, the reason we never could get this on the books before Roe was overturned was because we had all these anti-choice Democrats. Whoops. And it's like, okay, well, all right, well then maybe stop electing them. But if once you say that the only way to win in these certain areas is to have anti-choice Democrats who maybe support increasing the minimum wage, though that's not always the case,
Most
and
of
that's
those
not how.
Democrats do not actually support
No,
those.
that's a
There's
it's
no,
a fantasy. It's a
yeah,
fantasy because most of white evangelical Christianity, if you're that obsessive about, say, abortion rights, trans rights,
mhm.
most of that is also very much mixed up in prosperity gospel.
Oh
And that's
yeah.
why I get so frustrated when I get these people talking about, well, what about Jesus? And Jesus taught that. Fuck Jesus. I'm sorry. Because that is not what is happening in America. Like, okay, well, that's all like I might as well just talk about what about the great Doctor Who and his magic sonic screwdriver. Like, this is not real. What is real is in America, all the ways, prosperity gospel. And with that, the wealthy have everything,
Mhm.
the white men control everything. Women are subordinate to the white men, and people of color and anyone who's the slightest bit different are treated like crap. That is the religion here.
Yeah.
And any sort of difference to that is not you're arguing for the wrong thing. You don't understand where these people are coming from. if they're that obsessed about abortion rights. The one other thing, because you were talking about universal health care, that would also require Democrats not backing down on things like, say, with the Hyde Amendment and sort of
Mhm.
and others of like, you know, because that was the fear, right? That, okay, well, we have universal health care, but we don't want to make Republicans angry. So,
Yeah.
you know, gender affirming care and abortion care and whatever
But
won't be
stop
covered.
starting with the compromise is like, that's bad negotiation.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's been evidence that are, I mean, the problem you start with a compromise because it's just like you know it's wrong. So it's just sort of like,
Yeah.
hey, do you want to go out with me on a Thursday? Because I know you probably don't want your big Friday time or Saturday time wasted on me. Maybe on a Thursday and somewhere where none of your friends and family would see us. So you're sort of leading with the fact of like,
Yeah.
I suck and maybe you'll
Yeah.
accept it. And that's sort of the idea of like, oh, a lot of what we believe, like, you know, raising the minimum wage, which I don't know why paying people more would suddenly be a bad thing, but raising wage, student debt relief or whatever. And what is always, and this happens, I saw this in the Wonkette comments as well for certain folks, some of your favorite people as well, was like, oh, well, we can't promote, you know, so student debt relief is a problem because, and then they'll repeat what Republicans say about it, which is a lie. It's like,
Yeah.
well, it's a lie, but it's like, okay, well,
But here's the thing, they can
just
say
counter.
anything about anything. They can lie
Yes,
about anything. Like,
that's a
not
lie. Why
even
don't you
that, like,
point out
literally
it's
no,
true?
like, this is the thing. Unless we keep pushing the truth, like, they'll win on everything because they can make shit up.
Well,
Like,
and they had Cal Rittenhouse on a tour. Cal Rittenhouse
yeah,
killed somebody, so Republicans can have Cal Rittenhouse on their American Dream tour,
yeah,
and he killed people. Surely you can find someone who, you know, can now afford to actually buy a new car. Like they were
yeah,
driving around on a Flintstone mobile with their feet because they were so far in debt on student loan. Like there's so many human stories.
yeah,
Just promote those. So then I would be like, oh well, gee, Republicans, I'm seeing a lot of stories of all the positives of this. And certainly I can appreciate the concern about sort of my tax dollars going to pay off loans for, you know, Paris Hilton's kids and you know, all the sort of who took gender studies courses. Why don't you actually show those examples? They can't. So here's real people.
yeah.
Similar with like
There
all
is
their
no
grooming talk.
issue happening in the United States right now, by the way, where people are like, wow, I'd really like to hire more people to do anything, but everyone was a gender studies major. Because that's not even possible. When I like, yeah, that's it's not even possible. Like, that's like there's not an act. This is not an actual issue. There aren't that many gender studies majors to begin with. Um, and they
Well,
have their own careers. They know what they're doing. Most of them are going into nonprofits and other kind of stuff. Like I was initially a major in cultural studies, but I switched to fiction writing. And at that point, it was one of like two cultural studies programs in the country. It's not like it was like, overrun. Those people are doing just fine. Or they're not that's not the problem. The problem is not that people are, majoring in things that Republicans don't personally like. It's that, education in general costs so much. It's that um, we are not hiring people who don't have college degrees. Like we're actively saying to like in general, okay, you go and like look on job boards, even like, I was looking on Craigslist today for reasons for a thing I was writing. And almost you look at these like jobs, everything for a long time was, you must have a college degree. When I was unemployed and looking for babysitting jobs, they were like, you have to have a degree from an Ivy League university to babysit my child and speak like at least three languages.
well, it was a form of class distinction. So
Yeah.
the perception is and especially for minorities. So I always got a
Mhm.
little frustrated when I was And look, I think Lauren Bobart's terrible for many reasons, not just because she doesn't have a college degree, but she's also intellectually uncurious. That's the biggest problem. But often this idea from sometimes white dudes of like, oh, you don't need, only the little people have to bother with college. Anyone can do anything without that degree. It's like, well, if you're a minority, that is such a degree of credentialism
Oh
that
yeah.
you are not going to get almost anything. It makes you very different. It means that they're going to let you close up at the end of the shift at McDonald's because, oh, he went to college. He's not like those other minorities. And so for years, that had been for Black people that had been in. So that was one of the reasons that loan relief for us would be very particular. I didn't need it, but I know a lot of Black people who did. And also, as you said, um, it is not just rich white people who benefited from this, and everyone wants someone with a college degree and someone who's gone to the right schools and whatever, because that means I can trust you more, or you can be a manager some way down the line. The days of like corporations don't care about people.
Yeah.
Frankly, companies are like, I'm going to take you, hey, Robyn, you dropped out of high school, but you're really smart, and I'm going to take you under my wing and train you, and you're going to be running the store. And by
Yeah.
the end of about 20 years, no, you're going to, at best, even if you got hired, you're going to be at that job forever. And I'm never going to, I mean, we put a lot of burden on training what was sort of the postgraduate degree for many people is, or even a college degree is,
Mhm.
basically we are no longer training people. We no longer, companies used to do that. They used to invest the time. Now they're like, well, why bother? Like, okay,
Oh
well, if I'm going to have someone who needs to you can run the register. Have you taken a business course? Have you done this? Have you done that? It all has to be on your dime and your time elsewhere. And so,
well,
of
yeah.
course, there should be relief for that.
Well, like, when I was looking for jobs at one point, I was looking into getting into certain things with like nonprofits. And in order to get certain jobs, you had to have already had an internship where you learned these programs. Like they weren't going to train you to use things like Donor Perfect and everything. Like I wanted to work in development because I was like, hey, you know what? Rich people, rich ladies love giving me money. It's like their favorite thing for some reason, at least when I'm working retail. So maybe that would be, that involves writing, it involves selling. Maybe that would be a good thing for me. Could not find a single job in that industry because you had to have had a specific internship where you learned how to do a thing. So, like, unless you hadn't, there shouldn't be jobs where, like, you, they will offer no training at all if they need a specific thing and you have to have, like, worked as an intern because not everyone can do internships even like that. Even that is like some class bullshit.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
free internships, especially in major cities,
mhm.
working for free is, obviously absurd. And I'm very pleased that I had pushed to end an unpaid apprenticeship program in a theater in Portland. And
Mhm.
my sense was, it was always like, we're going to do it better eventually. And it's like, well, unless you stop, you will never do it right. And they did
Yeah,
stop. And it only took a year of not doing it. And then they finally went out, found the money, raised the funds. And
yeah.
now it's coming back, and those people are being paid, because it's like, well, you can't just have you just can't have a free, these
Well, then it's
internships
only
of
for
that
rich
thing.
people. Like, or
Yeah,
rich.
or to be able to afford even to, like, not work during the summer. So forget,
Yeah.
like, you are, it's a luxury even to afford to not make money.
Hmm.
And so, um, somewhat related to work and everything, this idea of our elected officials who work forever, and I think just sort of the impact we see from that. So Mitch McConnell had another incident where he sort of froze. He just, you know, was not unresponsive for about 30 seconds. And people were, they don't like Mitch McConnell or saying certain things about that. I'm not one to wish anybody ill. I get why people do that. What I find fascinating, and I think, I don't, your opinion on this, because there's this idea of where marginalized people, especially in America, are supposed to find some degree of that they're abusers within this country because they're within this country are part of their family. So, like, you know, I'm not comparing McConnell to say Osama bin Laden, but after no one was like, "Oh, bin Laden looks frail now, and he has a kidney problem. Let's feel bad for him." It's like people cheered. I remember people cheering when he died, and so when Trump had COVID in October of 2020, everyone, it was all, especially from the Chris Murphys of the world, were like, well, he's our president, let's wish him the best. And I was like, well, I'm not wishing that he die. I'm also not, I'm kind of like, let's see what happens. What I found fascinating here was that, again, not wishing that he died, just pointing out the logical thing here that did occur. He survived and like tried to overthrow the government, and people died as a result. So am I saying the world would have been better off if he had succumbed to COVID? I'm not going that far. I'm just saying there's a clear pattern here. And it is just sort of, I don't know. I find, look, the idea that there are people who, I don't know, it's not just punch clock villainy. I think a lot of Democrats were part of the, so it's like, oh, McConnell, some guy who works for Republicans are part of our country club, and they check in and whatever. They're sort of doing different things. They're different from someone overseas, even like Putin or some other who are actually hurting people. And I've often felt like the challenge is that for the average working person in America, or marginalized, especially marginalized members, if you are a woman who, or a pregnant person in general, who can't get reproductive care, if you're a queer person who has to flee the state where you grew up, it's like, okay, well, maybe it's okay that I really, really hate the people who are actively doing this to me. Like, it's no longer like a difference of opinion. These are people actively trying to hurt me in ways that feel much more immediate than the, someone in Iran or Iraq or North Korea. And that's long been a sort of debate, I think, among the left of like, it's not just that you can't see a big picture. It's just like, well, okay, I get it. Like, Kim Jong-un's a bad guy, but, this Tennessee governor might be even worse. This person's even worse. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? So that people,
I mean, that is actually like my reason for why we, should really cut down on defense spend. I feel like spending so much on defense is extremely hypocritical, and we're not actually taking care of people at home. Like, I do. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Why are we spending all this money to like defend ourselves from like hypothetical people who might attack us when we're actually already being attacked here at home in various ways? Like, people are dying because they don't have health care. People are suffering because they don't have homes. They are suffering because they don't have enough to eat. And like, what's like, yes, they could bomb us, but like, what are they going to do that's worse than what we're already doing to ourselves? Like, about the way that we have like decided to live. Like, we have decided to live this way. Like, that would be, in many states, women are getting their reproductive rights taken away. Trans people are getting their rights taken away. Like, what are they going to do to us that's worse than what we're already doing to ourselves? I can't think of anything other than just like bombing, which, doesn't happen all that often. I mean, yes, it obviously happened once, but like, or twice. Yeah. But it's not an everyday worry for most people.
I had a comedy routine ages ago about sort of trying to explain Vietnam and domino theory to a black person in Jim Crow, Alabama. It'd be like, okay, well, your son's got to go over there and die to stop this because if the Soviets take that and this, and then America falls, and then you're all being ruled by the Soviets. And okay, like, how does that, like,
yeah, how is that?
How does my life? How is that one worse? And how does my style of life work? Like, if let's say nothing else changes, but I'm just wearing a Soviet drab uniform, doing my crap life, but at least the white people who are torturing me are also feeling bad. Maybe I'm very petty about that, but like, hey, okay, but at least I'm not going to die for it. But this idea, and that's been the case, right? Like the idea of like saying, go, I mean, Muhammad Ali was one who's like, what are you talking about? Why am I going to, like, why would
Yeah.
I shoot other poor people for some, because you can't
I mean,
explain it. You have to get grand.
that's all war is anyway. It's like we'll set our poor people up against your poor people and let them fight, and then one of us will get more money out of it.
Yeah. And, and look, obviously I am not with the members of the left who think we should let Putin take over Ukraine and destroy, Ukraine. That's not where I am. I'm like, I think it's important to recognize that there are people actively doing harm to other people. It's beyond like, okay, well, this person is proposing policies that aren't as constructive as the policies I would support. And okay, well, maybe things aren't going as great. No, there are people who I find are active. Some of this stuff is actively malicious. It is hateful. It is like trying to exterminate a group of people. Well, either make sure you can exist, like a trans people, or queer people, but also a trans and queer people and Black people. We want to erase your history. We want to erase your identity. That is like actively malicious type of
Yeah.
stuff. It's not a disagreement. So these are sort of like, and then to say like, okay, the person doing that, the politicians who go to work every day doing that, they don't care about any sort of positive things they could do with the world, that this is their main jam, that we should like somehow we're part of the same team. So, oh no, something happened to this politician who's torturing me. I should feel real bad about it. And it's like, I don't really know if I think that's a lot to ask of
Well,
people
I
who
think that we
do
have
that.
a very stupid idea of what civility is in this country. Like, the assumption is that civility is being nice to Republicans even when they're terrible. In other countries, it is perhaps we don't let people die in poverty. Like that's considered a very civil thing to do. Their civility is we let like people have health care, they have child care, they have public transportation funded. They have all these things, and that's civility to them. That's civility is not necessarily always, oh, I'm gonna, get it together to be like, oh, I have, love for my enemy. That's not necessary. No one like, you know, that's just window dressing, really. That's not civility. That's not actual civility.
No, it's yeah. I think window dressing is a good way of putting it. I think Mitch McConnell is enduring what a lot of people in the world endure. I don't relish it. I think what's relevant more is just, I don't know, and I've said this about Dianne Feinstein, so it's certainly not a partisan issue, or about anyone, regardless of politics. I don't know. I'm glad that I've never gotten so obsessed with power that that I would cling to it, even at this point. Like when it's a point of where, you know, how much longer do I have? And I'm not trying to be blunt
Yeah.
or cruel. I'm just looking at calendars, and when you are malfunctioning in public like that, it's like, you know, if that's going to happen, I'm always the sort of person who looks at, since I was 8, like, oh my goodness, I would watch something and be like, oh, that could happen to me.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, I could have this horrible disease or that horrible disease. I was a fun child. But
Yeah. No, I
I'm very,
would imagine.
I'm very aware that this could happen to all of us. But to me, it's like when that happens to me, I want to be at my home with my kids. Like, why am I at this political event? Or when I'm like being wheeled around just to raise my hand to vote for something that any other number of people with similar
Well, given
politics
how high
could do.
Republicans want to raise the age to get Social Security to, maybe he's trying to set an example.
Yeah. Maybe, yes. He's
So,
like
like,
just
work
being
until you
noble.
die
Yeah,
is,
like
yeah,
but as I said, like the Wall Street, like that would have, everyone trying to sort of massage it. Even Biden said, I spoke to him later, he was fine. Like, imagine if that had been, like, again, I would say the Walmart greeter or any sort of old guy at something, and he froze and they took him away. And like the president called him, it's like, don't worry, he's okay to go to work. It's like, oh my
Well, I
God.
mean,
Like,
honestly, like this week I saw an article about like town congratulates crossing guard for 50 years of hard work. And I'm like, let that woman retire. Like, let her retire. Like, I don't think she wants to still be a crossing guard.
I refuse to believe
Like,
that. Like, people present that as somehow that gives purpose in life. And I'm going to say here, I've known people who stopped working and then, wasted away. But that's a problem. I think we need to create a world where just go play with a puppy or go in your garden or do
but this,
something.
like,
There's ways
why
to
is
engage in the world
everything of
that's not,
value
yeah.
something that makes money?
But yeah, like there's some point of like the ideas that you are contributing for your right to exist until you physically could no longer do it.
Yeah.
I refuse to believe that. I believe that there has to be a point of where, hey, I'm 60 or whatever they like. I can now, for X amount of time that let's say the average lifespan is 75. We're saying that you have 10 or 50 years where you do not have to contribute
Yeah.
your physical to exist. And you can contribute in many ways. There are so many ways that we need people to help or do charity. Like if that lady, that crossing guard was like at a relief effort for hurricane victims or something and doing stuff. That's a great story. I would
Yeah.
love to see that. Or I would love to see, but when you're clocking in and clocking out, it implies to me you got to do it. And I feel like, okay, I don't think you need to gotta do anything at this point.
It's
Something's wrong.
not healthy. My friend was visiting from Iceland this past week, or actually she's still here, but I was just away. But, she was telling me about how in Iceland, all of the people, like all of the older people, get assigned like a young person who, like, gets the job while they're in college to like drive them around, take them to the movies, so they can like be independent and stuff, and like go and do fun things. And like that's amazing. That's an amazing way to treat your old people, you
Yeah.
know. And like here we're like, we're gonna raise the age to get Social Security to like 85, maybe. Would that be good? And you know,
And they always, I love it because then, well, someone whispers to them, like usually the Republican of like, okay, well, old people vote. And then they're always structure it. So like, oh,
yeah,
well, effective at this date. So the demographic, young people, I'm going to screw
yeah,
over. But don't worry if you're like 80
you're
now, you're
good.
going to be good. I'm going to screw over the next generation. We have to because they're going to be living
Yeah,
they're going to be living to 120 or something, except they won't because
yeah.
they won't have as good health care and they will catch fire because of global warming. I mean, it's a bad scene. So I think we're sort of at time. Is there any other Labor Day gifts? We always at this point want to thank everyone. It's been about 2 years since we started doing this, I
I
think, on Labor
know, I
Day.
know.
We appreciate the people who've subscribed. We enjoy when we see more subscribers. Like, share,
Yes.
tell your friends,
Say
watch,
nice things
join
about
us.
us.
Yes, and
We like
participate.
that.
Talk amongst yourselves. This is a recorded thing, but you can still. I hope that you were still
Yeah.
participating down in the
Yep.
corner there.
Open
So
thread away.
yes, thank you, everyone. We will. At least I will. Maybe Robyn will not, but I will see you back here on Tuesday. Take care.
I will not, but